Hello, my name is...
The Ruben Report.
I'm here to educate you on the dangers of eating bad soup. You see, I've been talking to the algorithm recently, and it told me that now is the time to reveal the Chinese Communist Party's master plan. After many math formulas, soul-searching, and consulting with my Chinese investors, I can now provide you with the most comprehensive Chinese 100-year plan available to public consumption. But first, let's get some context. Your context, in fact. The tale of two brothers. You are a peasant pig farmer in the rural province of Sichuan, China. Your existence as a person is essentially inconsequential. But your brother Richard, who you clearly remember having an emotionally turmoiled childhood, managed to enter one of China's premier political academies through cognitive ability alone. During Chinese Thanksgiving dinner, Richard tries to explain to you the intricacies of the party's theoretical base. Realizing that you can barely spell your name, he attempts to simplify it for you through farm animal analogies. He tells you that you are a stinky pig, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and the ruling class of greedy tigers ultimately do not give a flying Chinese canoe about you, at least in the past. In comes a very special little panda called Mao Zedong. Mao really loves pig. He thinks pigs are wonderful, but have the wrong idea about almost everything. And as long as they do, greedy tigers will always be large and in charge. Mao understood that one pig may feed a family, but a
billion pigs can bring about ecological collapse through methane excretion.
In a fit of panic, you exclaim that using animal analogies as a class descriptor is discriminatory, distasteful, and potentially racist. Richard reminds you that you are a smelly pig and asks, what the fuck do you know about literary devices anyway? He continues, Mao had really big thoughts about the world. The three worlds, in fact. Mao divided the planet into rich and greedy tigers, dumpster diving raccoons, and domesticated farm animals like you. He believed that the primary purpose of pigs like you was to keep the tigers rich and fat while the raccoons sustained themselves purely of the fecal leftovers of tigers. Mao believed that a popular army of many pigs can take on the greedy tigers and make everyone's life better, but only if they had the right idea. That idea was communism with Chinese characteristics. The idea of Chinese communism has changed significantly throughout the years, but that doesn't mean that Mao was wrong, because he believed that everything was made out of wrong, and that two wrongs make a right, or a better wrong. You remember him calling this something along the lines of diabetics? Diuretics? Something like that. Richard told you that a good example of diuretics is just looking at the three big bad hombres who changed our constitution. Little Panda Mao being the first, he really liked farm animals, but if they didn't have the right idea about the world, then they should be made to do so. The second was Wolf Boy Big Dengus Xiaoping. He also thought that farm animals are cool, but he believed that in order to keep the pigs happy, we need to empower the horse boys that work in the factories. If we produce enough stuff for everybody, then everybody is happy. Unlike Mao, Dengus didn't think that the right idea matters as long as there is observable results. And in order for us to know what a good result is, we also need to empower the owl people in the university. You felt that the animal metaphors were only making this sound more confusing, but Richard at that point was already soaked in baijiu, and you know very well that when Richard hits the bottle, he can get very physical. So, he didn't complain. He went on to say that the third big boy was a nondescript animal, Xi Jinping. Richard told you that our great leader Xi expanded upon the previous two by adding environmental concerns, calling for more direct leadership from the party, and sustaining peaceful relations with all other countries. The dialectics are there. Mao was for rural, Deng was for urban, and Xi combined the two into a superior idea. Everything started to make sense, but you had this nagging concern in your head. It would seem that these dialectics are made to justify power incrementally moving away from the pigs and into the greedy paws of a new class of tigers. You expressed this to Richard, who rightfully shut your mouth by beating the ever-loving shit out of you. You stood up from the thick, fresh puddle of your own blood, gave your brother a hug, and saw him off. Oh, hold on. My investors are telling me it's time for an ad break.
Bernie Sanders wants to take away your Chinese money. Donald Trump wants to take away your Chinese money. Why? Because they're racist. Applying Western standards of liberty to our Chinese friends is imperialistic and problematic. Attacks on the Chinese Communist Party is tantamount to xenophobia because Chinese culture is rich with tradition and perfectly compatible to an overbearing regime. It is in their history. It is who they are. Who are we to tell them otherwise?
Mike Bloomberg 是中国共产党的名誉会员，中共对彭博总统任期可能造成的任何干扰不承担任何责任。我尿布里的臭便便。
Every time I do that, it fucking hurts so much. Oh, you think it's funny? You find it funny? You think it's funny when a man is in pain? You piece of shit, go fuck yourself. Life continued as normal. The pig farm brought food to the table. Every day was a new day. You were happy. But little did you know that Richard became very perplexed with what you told him before he broke your jaw. Years passed and he kept climbing the party ladder. He was a public official now. You were very proud of your brother. A few years later, during a Chinese Hanukkah, Richard took you to the side and asked you to go for a walk around the farm. You crossed the farm, filling time with small talk until you found yourself next to a creek. You decided to take a seat and enjoy the view. As your eyes followed the birds crossing over into the horizon, Richard was uncharacteristically silent. He seemed to be bothered by something. You asked if he's alright. He hesitated and asked you if you remember that night he tore your jaw open. You laughed and remembered the farm animals. Richard didn't seem to enjoy reminiscing about that. He then said that as he climbed the party higher, more and more info became available to him. He said that he didn't take your comments seriously since you're just a garbage peasant. But then, he looked into it. He came to realize that you might have been right all along. That ever since Deng Xiaoping, the party has employed what he calls cognitive meritocracy, where the most mentally able among us are the most fit to rule. However, the ones measuring cognitive ability were state universities, where being a family member of the party official is often confused with being super smart. It is less likely for someone to be both intelligent and have party connections. So those people who are actually cognitively better will usually be left isolated and politically impotent in the scientific community. Those who did have party connections will become political or business leaders, and since they somehow passed the cognitive checks in education, we can present it as them being mentally deserving of rulership. This way, class divisions in China are justified since the leadership is biologically superior to the rest. Since party connections prove your biological superiority, the party has an incentive to heavily invest in separating the ruling class from its constituents along biological lines. This is why they've been investing in genetic engineering so much recently. They want a physical barrier that keeps the working class from having any political power. That physical barrier can only be bypassed if you're born into a family with party connections.
The Wuhan virus was
Actually a miserable party failure. But the party will use it as a reason to divest public resources into biotechnology research. By genetically engineering the ruling class, they guarantee that their century plan isn't compromised by the interests of the public. Plus, they will hold an advantage through genetically engineering their leaders of science, three doctrines, surveillance, resource, and biology. When all three reach optimal status, they will invade Taiwan while simultaneously embargoing the US, crippling their medical industry. The Second Cold War starts with a Chinese home field advantage. When they come out,
winding road to the Han Fan, a lot of the
finished what he had to say, you were speechless out of shock. But he was your brother, so what can you do? You held his hand in brotherly love and watched the sunset together. For a split moment, the beauty of the world reminded you how insignificant all of this talk is. You were just happy to be able to share this moment with your dear brother. The next morning, you parted ways. That was the last time you ever saw Richard. A week later, party leadership sends you a letter thanking you for your service. A month later, China invades Taiwan.
You've reached the end of the video. At the end of each video, I'll be answering the top-rated question in the comments. This time, my good friend Nomadic Sage asks, what's the point of your channel? I don't know, brah. I have like 4 to 5 more years until everybody gets bored of talking about politics all the time and go back to being apathetic. Maybe until then I can earn enough Patreons to buy that Fiat moped I always wanted.